Well, welcome and thank you so much for joining us this evening. We'll go ahead and dig in to a topic that is pretty, I think, timely because we're seeing a little bit of heat after the weather that was actually pleasant and a rainy spring and cooler temperatures. Um, but we want to create a healthy landscape despite the heat, and despite the drought that summer will likely bring. A healthy landscape can do a lot of things, not just aesthetically in the landscape, but functionally. It can increase our home's value, having a nice, healthy landscape. It can help us reduce our utility bills. A lot of times we have plants that break up the heat island effect. Large trees planted on the southwestern exposure can help to shade and cool our homes in the summer. And then when those trees lose their leaves in the winter, they allow the sun's rays to help heat up our homes a little bit. We get alerts on our phones all the time that say that it's an ozone alert day. And vegetation and healthy landscape can help to clean and filter our air. It can also help to control flooding and erosion. We've seen several heavy rainfall events this season already. And unfortunately, what happens with those is some of our soil, if there's bare soil in the landscapes in urban areas, that will run off near to our nearby creeks and then eventually settle up in our lakes. And over time, our lakes hold less water. So we want to reduce the erosion if possible. It can also provide essential habitat. Just earlier this afternoon, I was watching two hummingbirds dance around in the backyard, and I get as much enjoyment from the animals, whether it's birds, hummingbirds, songbirds, could be butterflies, dragonflies, or even the turtles and the lizards and the toads that are abundant this season. So those are some steps that you may want to implement to create that wildlife oasis. Now, there are challenges to growing plants, especially the past couple years. We've had extreme heat and drought, record breaking, in fact, in our summer months. We also have had extreme freeze events. And so that weather can certainly be a challenge if you're gardening in North Texas. Also, finding the right plant for the right place in terms of sunlight. Some landscapes have a lot of shade, some have more sun. Depending on the quantity and quality of sunlight you have, you really need to tailor in the right plant palette to set yourself up for success. Of course, plants that thrive in the shade are not going to do as well in the sun, and vice versa. We also have weeds that are prevalent in this region. They compete with our plants for not only water, but also sunlight nutrients. We want to keep those at bay, but we want to do that in a responsible way so those chemical pesticides are not running down our storm drain, ending up to those local water bodies. And then, of course, there are other pests that could be different disease problems. It could be insects, although most insects are either beneficial or benign. There are some that are pests. And so one thing we can do is by planting native and adapted plants, they tend to be healthier overall. They can overcome the heat and the drought. And because they're less stressed, they tend to have less pest problems associated with them. And then, as Heather alluded to, water is one of the biggest challenges to growing plants in Texas. Either we don't have enough of it, or rarely we have too much of it, but it's not always at that middle point. So how we manage water in our landscapes can help our plants thrive, but how we manage water as a community can ensure not only that we have plenty of water for our plants, but we have water to drink and water to bathe and to cook, and all those essential things we need water for. Unfortunately, in the summer month in this area, evaporation and transpiration rather, exceeds precipitation, if I can get that out. In summer, evaporation and transportation exceed precipitation. And all those long words just mean is that there's more water loss through the soil and through the leaves of the plants because it's hot and windy and the air is dry, that we're losing water through those processes faster than the rainfall can can replenish those sources. And so when it rains, that water ends up in our local lakes. And over time, that water is going to either be used by us coming out of our faucets, or some of that is going to evaporate. So we like to think of our local water bodies as a bank account. And so let's say that I only get paid in the spring, and I've got to make that paycheck last us June, July, and August until we get into hopefully a cooler or wetter season, which for us is typically going to be the fall. And so if we don't manage those finances or those resources over the summer well, we could get ourselves in a bind. And what we don't want to see any overdraft fees. We want to make sure that we have plenty of water to get us through the summer. And one thing we can do is just use those resources responsibly. We're not saying absolutely don't water at all. What we're saying is when we do need to water, we're going to do it at the right time and the right amount. So we're taking advantage of that resource, but using it in a responsible way. Now, Heather alluded to, we live in one of the fastest growing areas, not only in the state of Texas, but in the country. In fact, North Texas is one of the most densely populated areas in the entire country. You'll look right there at those red boxes, and each one of those color areas represents a fourth of the population of Texas, which North Texas now exceeds over 8 million people, which is remarkable. How much water do we have? We have plenty of water right now, but those water resources are expected to decline over the next 50 years. And so we have this rapidly growing population, we have aging infrastructure, we only have so many lakes, although there are a couple lakes coming online. Really, that's just kind of a stopgap measure. Where we really see the most room to make water last or go longer is actually through using water more responsibly and conserving that. And we have room for improvement. This map just shows the different areas of Texas and how they use water in terms of gallons per day per household. And you'll notice in the C area, we use on average 80 to 99 gallons per day per water. But you see other areas around the state, up in Amarillo, they're using more than us. I will say, though Amarillo gets about 18 inches of rainfall a year, we get twice that, right? So we should not be using as much water from our lakes. We should be letting Mother Nature, do the watering with possible and planting those drought tolerant plants. You see down around Houston, they get plenty of rainfall. So they don't actually need to use as much water for outdoor watering. So kind of if you see that orange, that means in this part of the state, we're using water on par as the folks in the drier regions of West Texas. So we do have some room for improvement. And, if you don't care about conservation or going green, what most people do care about is saving green. And you probably noticed, if you haven't noticed last month, this month your water bill is probably going to increase if you have started some outdoor watering. But statistically, homeowners tend to overwater landscapes by 2 to 3 times the amount that's actually needed. And that's, scientifically collected data, and that's one of the resources that Water is Awesome provides, is you can sign up for emails or text messages. I've signed up for both, and I promise you that they don't send you spam or anything else, but weekly updates on when and how much to water your lawn. And that really does, although that information is really specifically for turf grass, it gives you a good idea of what water is needed on the entirety of your landscape, especially those drought tolerant native and adapted plants. We do see several gardening mistakes in North Texas. Unfortunately, a lot of people are new to gardening in Texas, and they buy the wrong plants. In fact, before I did horticulture, believe it or not, the family business is construction. And so I grew up on a job site and would do the finish out for houses. And some of the landscapes that go in, man, I mean, builders have room for improvement as well, because so many of those plants are not well adapted to the heat, the drought, the cold temperatures. And so it's hard to be successful with those plants long term. So let's replace those with the best adapted plants for our area. Planting in the wrong season. We own a nursery and we've got plants and our plants are on clearance. But if people come up and they ask me, hey, am I okay planting this right now? I would say we are in a stretch where it looks like for the next, 10 to 14 days, we're going to be above average in terms of temperature. And it doesn't look like we're going to see a lot of rain during that stretch. And so it is not optimal planting time. Primarily, as a horticulturist, we recommend people plant in the fall when we have cooler temperatures, when rainfall tends to be more frequent. And that is the biggest stretch, fall, around, maybe middle September, October, between us and 100-degree temperatures. And that's what you want when you're planting. Now, a lot of people, in fact, we do 3 times our business in the spring, and people like to plant in the spring. But it could be 90, 100 degrees in March, April, and May in Texas. And so really, we need to avoid planting because that water loss makes us water more, and it's less of a sure bet of getting those plants established. When you're trying to establish plants in the summer, it can be done, but it's a lot more challenging, especially for novice gardeners. Improper watering is also a challenge. So there's poorly designed irrigation systems. You've probably seen these when people are watering, the water's going down the storm drain, down the curb, and that ends up in our local rivers and lakes. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend that money on your water bill just to be sending it on your landscape. When you're watering, the water should actually go to the root zone when the plants can use it. Some folks are confused or afraid of their irrigation controller. I don't want to throw my wife under the bus, but trying to show her, it's fairly easy. If you can program your phone alarm, essentially that's all an irrigation controller is. That box that's in your garage typically, it is just an alarm clock that shows your irrigation system when to come on and run and how long to run for. And it's fairly easy. Most of them have YouTube videos that walk you through the process, how to set it up. But I promise you, you can work a phone, you can work an irrigation controller. People water at the wrong time. So during the hottest parts of the day or during windier times. Now, if you water when it's windy, some of that moisture is going to blow to an area that you didn't want to irrigate, whether that's a sidewalk or a driveway or your neighbor's yard. So it's better to water early in the morning. I usually water about 5 or 6 o'clock. I water manually. So just when I get the notification from Water is Awesome, that are the 2 resources they have on the website to tell you when to water and when to wait. I get that email. I say, okay, it's time to water. It's my watering day. And I go and push that irrigation system and let it run. And then don't run it if Mother Nature's doing the watering for us. Improper irrigation maintenance. Periodically, you need to go through your irrigation system. We recommend once a month. I know people think that's a drag, but if you do it with a cup of coffee in the morning and listen to the birds chirp, or if you do it in the evening with a cocktail, then you can see, just run each zone for 5 minutes, make sure that, I just actually this morning made some adjustments. So just make sure that all the water is going where it's supposed to go. And if you have any leaks, that you fix those as quickly as possible. Failure to add and maintain compost and mulch. I recommend compost and mulch to anybody doing any garden, whether it's vegetable gardening, growing trees, growing perennial plant shrubs, whatever. It's the best way to condition our soil to be able to absorb more water and hold on to that water like a sponge, which will allow us to get through those drier times. Compost and mulch are the best thing that you can do to your garden to make it more resilient to the heat and the drought of Texas summers, and you can quote me on that. Now, if your landscape is looking a little sick right now, you can give it a little boost of life with what I like to call landscape CPR. So the acronym CPR, the C stands for conservation. We want to save resources like water, improve soil and protect it, help conserve energy, especially with the challenges we've had with ERCOT lately. Not to throw them under the bus, but they are real challenges. The air quality challenges that we've had. And then at the same time, we can preserve and enhance habitat and ecological functions. Of course, most of the land around here used to be prairies, and so we can take some of those native plants and put them back in that role. The P in CPR is permeability. We want to disconnect impermeable surfaces. Well, what does that mean? That means areas where raindrops won't infiltrate. If it was a prairie area, the water drops would hit and they would go into the soil. Now they hit rooftops, driveways, sidewalks, patios, parking lots. And if we can harvest rainwater in cisterns and rain barrels, I just hooked up a rain barrel at my house the other day. There's a side story there. I lost my cistern in a tornado a couple of weeks ago, but I got rainwater harvesting again. And then and my colleagues teaching a rain garden class here shortly. But we can harvest water in the ground. We can harvest it in cisterns. We can, instead of using concrete, we can use paved stone or different types of gravels to infiltrate that water, where not only is it not sending it to the storm drain causing flooding and pollution, but it's going into the ground where the plant's roots can use it. One way we can do that, and rain barrels and cisterns are great, but creating soil that is biologically active, adding that compost, using IPM, integrated pest management, or organic practices to increase the microbiology of the soil, which again is going to aid our plants of being more drought resilient. And then the R in CPR is retention. I am greedy with my water drops. I want to hold on to every drop of water that lands on my property. Statistically, in my area, we get about twice as much rainfall falling on my property than we use in our water bill. And so that's free water falling from the sky. I'm going to take advantage. I can also reduce localized flooding, localized in small areas. You can grade your landscape to capture water, allow it to slow spread and sink throughout the landscape, and eliminate runoff as much as possible, that water running off the landscape. Now, lawns are honestly one of the biggest challenges in terms of using water in North Texas. And because statistically lawns are overwatered, I love my neighbor, he's a great guy, but he waters every day. His irrigation system goes off for 10 minutes. Not only is that a violation, but it's just not a good practice in terms of health of your lawn. Overuse can lead to pollution. I'm so sorry. Over applying fertilizers and pesticides and other chemicals, they run off our landscapes into the storm drain. About 50% of any urban area is covered by lawns and landscapes. If we look kind of a bird's eye view of Tarrant County, and turf grass is the largest irrigated crop in the United States. If we look at a bird's eye view of the entire country, you'll notice that turf grass makes up more than any other irrigated crop, corn, soybean, and wheat. It's remarkable. So one thing we can do is reduce our turf grass area. Now, we do landscape designs, and almost every landscape design we do, we limit the amount of turf grass that we install. We still have lawn areas where you can kick a soccer ball or throw a football or let your dog out to use the restroom or just sit, enjoy, and talk to a neighbor. But it doesn't need to be 90% of the landscape. Historically, builders would put in a lot of sod because that's cheap and easy, but it's really not sustainable, and it's not a beautiful feature, I wouldn't think, of the landscape when it makes up mostly turf grass. So we can increase our beds with a third native and adaptive perennials, and then we can increase our pervious hardscape areas. So instead of concrete, fire pit, patio, pool surround, you can use pavers or different gravels or flagstone or anything that has little fissures or cracks that will infiltrate some of that water. There are some great resources. That Water is Awesome. We work very closely and have helped you to come up with some resources that will help, whether you're picking the right turf grass. If you want to do a little bit of a facelift and reduce your turf grass area, but maybe you're sick of the St. Augustine, or you're trying to find an alternative to Bermuda. If you go to the lawn care guide at Water is Awesome, we have a step-by-step brochure that breaks down the 4 warm season turf grasses that thrive in North Texas, excuse me, and the different benefits of both. Now, if you have a full sun area, you can choose Bermuda grass or buffalo grass. Both of those thrive in areas that get at least 6 hours of sunlight or more. If you have a lower light area, maybe it's an area that only gets 5 to 6 hours of sunlight, St. Augustine and zoysia grasses are options for you. They'll also handle full sun. But the challenge is when you have less than 4 hours of sunlight, turf grass is really not an option. There are no turf grasses that thrive in North Texas that don't need at least 4.5 hours of sunlight to thrive. So there's options and alternatives there. You can dig deeper again by visiting waterisawesome.com. You can even open it up in another browser and check it out. During the summer, Heather said, on average, 60% with broken irrigation systems or those mistype irrigation systems on a hot, windy day, you could be up to 70% of water used by the residential landscape, up to 70% of water used by residential customers is applied to the landscape during the summer months. But we want to remind folks that irrigation supplements rainfall. That means that if it has not rained in a significant period of time and it's hot and dry, then we probably do need to supplement and make sure our plants are surviving with a little bit of irrigation. But if it just rained, or if rain's in the forecast, you probably don't need to run your sprinklers. It just makes sense that if Mother Nature is doing the watering, then why waste your time and your money and putting that water out? In fact, if the soil's already saturated, most of that water, when you run your sprinklers, would just go down the storm drain, and you'd be paying for a resource you're not using. The opposite is true, that let's say we do run our sprinklers and the next day it rains, then where is that water going? If the soil's so saturated, it can't go in there. And so it would just run and contribute to flooding problems. So we don't want either one of those. Best management practices: water only when needed, water deeply to promote deep and healthy roots. I think there's a slide, but I like the cycle and soak method of irrigation. So instead of running your sprinklers for 15 minutes all at once, if you water for 5 minutes and then have a period of time where that water can infiltrate into the soil, and then water another 5 minutes and let that water infiltrate the soil, and the first irrigation cycle will push deeper into the soil profile, and then another cycle of 5 minutes will deliver that water even deeper. And so water deeper in the soil encourages roots to grow deeper, and those roots tend to be more resilient to heat and drought. If you're like my neighbor and you're watering every day for a little bit, it develops a shallow root zone that is not resilient to heat and drought. So deeply and frequently, most of your irrigation controllers have a cycle and soak. It's just a button you push. You don't have to do anything. It makes it simple, or you can program it through different cycles. And again, that's very easy, and it's kind of a one-time deal, and you're good to go. Visit Water is Awesome, read more about cycle and soak. There's also some great videos on their YouTube channel. Maintain 2 to 4 inches of mulch. Now, this isn't on the lawn, that's in the landscape beds, but again, up to 60% more water can infiltrate the soil when we mulch, and then it holds that moisture, prevent it from evaporating so it can stay in the root zone longer. Make sure your irrigation system is designed for efficiency, which really just means make sure the water is going to the plant root zones and it's not going down the storm drain, your sidewalk, your driveway. Make sure it's going where it's supposed to, and make sure it's not evaporating. That's why I like drip irrigation. I have drip irrigation in all my landscape beds, and over that, I have that 2 to 4 inches of mulch. And so when I water, the water stays right there in the root zone. You need to install per state and local specifications. So as a homeowner, you can make adjustments to your landscape. You want to make sure that you know what you're doing. But if you're hiring somebody, you need to make sure that they're a licensed irrigator. They're doing stuff the right way. Always water without creating runoff. So if you see any water going down the street, then you need to make those corrections. Not only is that going to save you money, but it makes more efficient use of that resource. And then check your irrigation system monthly. I mentioned that, but just, do it in the evening. Maybe you only want to do it, April through November during the growing season. But it is a good idea to make sure that your irrigation system is working properly. And if your irrigation system is a faucet and your arm and a hose, which I do some of that myself as well, then you're all set. Let's see here. So I mentioned native and adapted plants, and a lot of times we see these plants and people think, oh, you're talking about cacti and yucca and rocks and just wildflowers. And we want to show people that no, you can have a lush, vibrant landscape that uses native plants, that's going to be more drought tolerant, more heat tolerant, uses less water, fertilizers, and pesticides. And really, it's not much more effort than traditional gardening practices. Now, what do we mean when we say native plants? Those are hardy, they're from Texas, they've evolved and are sometimes harsh and unpredictable climate. The adapted plants are those that are indigenous to areas that have a similar climate that we do, so similar rainfall patterns, similar soil types, similar heat regime. We want to make sure that we're not choosing any invasive plants. Those are non-native plants that spread out of your landscape into especially riparian areas or native ecosystems. But there are some great adapted plants that are pollinator supporting species that are heat tolerant, drought tolerant, and cold tolerant. And those may be plants that you want to look at. Now, depending on whatever your philosophy is, you could choose plants that are native to North Texas or native to the Blackland Prairie or the cross timbers, the ecoregions in our area. Maybe plants that are native to Texas, but if it's native to El Paso or Houston, you want to make sure that it's going to grow well because their climates are different than ours. And of course, Texas is a big area. Or there are plants native to North America. There may be plants that grow well or that are indigenous to Louisiana or New Mexico or Arkansas. Plants that are native to the Americas, some native to Mexico or Guatemala, like black and blue salvia is a great one. That hummingbirds love. There's different subspecies, there's different nativars or cultivars of native plants, but depending on your philosophy, you can make those choices for your own landscape to set you up for success in the long run. Now, if you are interested on what plant is native to your region, you can use this website. It's called BONAP, or the Biota of North America program. And so if I want to look up what kind of species of bluebonnets are indigenous to my area, I can visit that website and it will show all the different species of the genus of bluebonnet, the lupinus, and I can make sure that I'm choosing the one that's best adapted to my region. A great resource there. Plant selection is really the key in drought-resistant landscaping. We want to make sure that our plants are resilient and adapted to our macro environment, our environment as a whole. In north central Texas, you may notice that we transitioned, the bulk of us, from zone 8A rather to zone 8B. And so that just means the past 30 years, we're getting better data and it's showing that we're trending a little bit warmer. Now, does that mean that we can't get down to 5 degrees this winter? No, but it just means the 30-year average, we're only getting down to about 20 to 25 degrees. That's our average. So all of our plants need to be at least that cold hardy. I would say 90% of the plants I put in my landscape are cold hardy to at least 5 or 10 degrees, because I know that in my lifetime in this landscape, hopefully in my lifetime in this landscape, that we're going to get that cold. And I don't want to put those plants in the ground now and they die the next time it gets really cold. So make sure your plants that you're planting are cold hardy to the region. Also, make sure they're adapted to our soil type and pH. Most of us have heavy clays. There are some sandy soils that go through here with a little bit more clay underneath. We typically have high pH soils. So are the plants you're planting in your landscape adapted to high pH soils? They're alkaline, which is just the opposite of acidic. East Texas has more acidic soils. The East Coast and the West Coast have more acidic soils, but generally in our area, they're very alkaline. So that means it's very hard to grow hydrangeas or hostas or raspberries or blueberries or azaleas. The list goes on, gardenias, camellias. All those plants love acidic soil. And then make sure that the plant can grow in our rainfall pattern. There are plants that do just fine with 36 inches of rainfall, and that's what we get on average. And so those plants don't need a lot of supplemental irrigation. But if you plant plants that are indigenous to areas that historically get more rainfall than us, then there's going to be larger gaps where they're really struggling, especially during the summer months, that you have to supplementally irrigate. So again, choose plants that can grow on that 36 inches of rain, but also those that are drought tolerant. One year we only got 18 inches of rainfall here in North Texas. And so if we had an 18-inch rainfall year, a lot of our plants would be struggling. So make sure from the onset that you're planting the right plants. That way the next time we only get 18 to 20 inches in a year, you're going to make sure that your landscape, that investment is going to be protected. You also want to make sure you're putting the right plant in the right place. So our microenvironment is what side of the house that you're putting your plant on, or what side of the street that you're on. So typically the southwestern exposure is going to be the hottest and the driest. The eastern exposure is going to get sunlight in the coolest part of the morning. The southern exposure, because we're in the northern hemisphere, is going to get more of the sunlight during the day. And the northern side of your landscape is going to be shaded because the sun is in the southern hemisphere and your house is here. Then the north side of your home and fences and trees are going to be the shadiest spot in your landscape. And so you can plant accordingly to set yourself up for success. So pay attention to the buildings, the structures, knowing the west side is the hottest, the south side tends to be the sunniest, the north side tends to be the shadiest, and at least we have that east side where we can grow some things. I'm kidding, you can plant plants, and we'll dig deeper into plants that will thrive in any landscape area. Know that the pavement is a heat island. It absorbs heat and it radiates some of that heat. So by pavement, by bricks, those tend to be the hottest, driest areas, and that's where I plant yucca, cacti, or plants like a Blackfoot daisy or skullcap, those really tough plants that love the desert. Those plants thrive in those areas, and so I try and mimic the areas that they would naturally go. Blackfoot daisy grows off of cliffs in far west Texas. I've seen them growing in a year where we only got 5 inches of rainfall and growing huge and beautiful. And you know, if you plant them during those areas, they thrive throughout the summer months. And then your irrigation system is part of your microclimate. So do you have some areas where you have good access to water, and some maybe it's an area further away, or it doesn't, the sprinklers don't hit there, or it's harder for you to drag the hose over there? That's where I would plant the plants that do well with little water. Plant them further away. I mean, you can plant them throughout your landscape, but I wouldn't plant a high water using plant far away from irrigation. I would plant it right by my faucet, or I would put it in a pot close to my door so I remember, hey, it's a really hot, dry day. I'm just going to water my little, you know, I have one high water using plant. I'm going to put it in there instead of putting a landscape with 90% high water using plants. You put those in those low-lying areas, the areas that stay wet, by a faucet or in a container, and you'll set yourself up for success. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions when we talk about native landscaping. People think they're weedy, wild, unkept, scraggly looking. And we want to show people that if you use the proper design principles, you can create a lush, vibrant landscape that looks as good as it functions. And so I'm going to go through these quickly, but anybody can do a search on landscape design principles, and you can dig deeper into these subjects. So unity, you want to emphasize a theme throughout your landscape, so everything is kind of homogeneous and goes together. You can create lines, whether they're pathways or they're borders or fences, to create different rooms and sections, just like you would a wall in your home. The lines of the landscape function in the same way. They could be even plant material. They could be more formal, they can be more naturalistic, depending on your style. Form is essentially just the shape of the plant, the three-dimensional shape. They can be columnar, they can be oval, vase shape, even weeping, pyramidal, round, in different shapes create interest in the landscape, and they make each plant pop out a little bit more. Texture is how fine or coarse or heavy or light the foliage is. It also is aided by color. And so if you put plants that have a very broad leaf next to plants that have a very thin leaf, it makes each plant jump out a little bit more. This is one of my favorite plantings right there. You can see the juxtaposition of the thin leaf and the fine leaf and against the big, broad agave, and it creates this dramatic effect. Scale. So if you have a really small landscape, you should probably choose plants that are overall smaller form. If you have a very large landscape, you may want to work with plants and pots and hardscapes that are larger, so you fill that space more easily, and it also creates more of a balance. Speaking of balance, you can balance your design planning, although it doesn't have to be a mirror image. You may want to do some of the same thing happening on the left side and the right side, or the foreground and the background, whether that's putting a grouping of 3 plants on one side of your entry, but balancing it on the other side with that same species on the other side, just so there's some balance. You can do that in the back and the front. It just makes your landscape flow like it's more intentional and meant to be. And this is one example that I like of balance, where the lines of the hardscape are very straight, but the plants inside, this native turfgrass, is a little bit more wild. So those straight lines help to reduce the wildness that's happening inside. Simplicity and variety, those two work together in a balance. So repeating the same plants and the same combinations throughout your landscape adds simplicity. And I would say for most homeowners, that is the greatest need. Looking at a homeowner's landscape versus one that is professionally designed, they tend to be more of a hodgepodge. But you can create variety. You certainly want to have variety, but you don't want to have one-off, just one of these, one of these, one of these. Do groupings of 3s and 5s and 7s. Use the same combinations repeated throughout the landscapes to achieve your goals. Color probably invokes the greatest response, and it's great for creating mood and feeling. And it probably is the most interesting thing that people find in the landscape. I would choose a theme. And so if you want to choose plants that are opposite in color over the color wheel, a lot of people like the purples and violets in combination with the yellows, or some folks like the oranges and the blues together. But it's really personal preference. Reds and oranges tend to bring things in closer and make it feel more intimate. So if you have a large landscape, maybe you want to choose more reds and oranges. Or if you have a smaller landscape, I like to use blues and purples, and they tend to add distance and make smaller areas feel bigger. You can use complementary colors, again, that are opposite on the color wheel, or you can use analogous colors, those that are side by side on the color wheel, to create monochromatic landscapes, which are some of my personal most beautiful landscapes, just repeating similar colors and that color scheme throughout the landscape. So the pink, the oranges, and yellows, they're just opposite, or right beside each other rather, on the color wheel. And so they kind of transition. If you want to learn more about landscape design, we don't have a lot of time tonight, but Piet Aldolf is one of my personal favorites. He's a Dutch garden designer that is noted for creating the new perennial movement. He's got a documentary that talks about his life and his designs, several books, great YouTube videos. His documentary is on PBS. But check out him if you want to be inspired to create a drought-resistant landscape using native plants that looks great. There's also Thomas Rainier and Claudia West that wrote a book called Planting in a Post-Wild World, Designing Plant Communities for Resilient Landscapes. They have some great designs and some tips there. But you just see, using native and adapted plants, these are extremely heat and drought tolerant, but the aesthetics are wonderful. What a peaceful place to sit and drink a cup of coffee. And if you like attracting that wildlife and building habitat, Doug Tallamy, famed for his first book or second book, I think, Bringing Nature Home. But he's also got several books on how you can garden to attract the butterflies and the hummingbirds and the wildlife that brings us so much enjoyment. So we're going to quickly go through some plants, but think about your problem areas. What are the areas of your landscape that are the biggest challenge for you? And then design to solve those solutions. Maybe it's the bare soil underneath the tree, and you want to bring out the landscape bed, and where the turf grass won't grow, you can plant a native ground cover that thrives in the shade. Or if you want to put that tree on the southwestern exposure to help cool your kitchen when you're cooking dinner at night, running the oven. All different things we can do. Layer to contrast the form, the texture, the different color of the leaves, the blooms, so you can see all those plants in different rows, tallest plants in the back, shorter plants going forward, and tucking in little plants throughout there. I'm going to quickly go through these plants, and you can jot them down if you want or take screenshots, but a redbud is a great drought-tolerant native ornamental tree that thrives in full sun to full shade. There's also Carolina cherry laurel. It's a great evergreen tree to shrub that thrives in full sun to part shade. Texas mountain laurel is one of the first things to bloom in the spring. It's a shrub that thrives in full to part sun and can handle a little bit of shade as well. Now, if you're looking for a tree that blooms all summer long, the desert willows look incredible. This morning, we went on a little day trip with my family, and my daughter was like, "What is this plant? All the blooms on the desert willow, but remarkable." Now, she's only 5, so we'll get her maybe 6 or 7, and she'll start learning more plants. She knows a few botanical names already, surprisingly. Different evergreen screens, like our native junipers. These are native cultivars of our Rocky Mountain juniper, blue arrow juniper, gray gleam, and skyrocket, depending on what feature you're looking for in a landscape. These thrive in full sun with well-draining soil. There's also, if you're looking for a Christmas tree form, the moonglow juniper. Again, all of these are a native plant that was just bred to fill different roles in a landscape setting. I absolutely love Yopon hollies and their cousin, the deciduous possum holly, picture on the right. They're a great shrub, and even the Yopon holly comes in different forms. There's a weeping form, there's an upright form, the skyline and the skyward. And not to plug a different nursery, but I think Fossil Creek in Fort Worth is moving, and they have a huge sale right now. And so again, I said it's not the best time to plant, but they have the upright Yopon hollies in stock. There's also the micron holly. It gets about 2 foot by 2 foot. It has these little elfin leaves. Those thrive in full sun to full shade. There are also those yucca and cacti. I love brake lights. Red yucca thrives in full sun to part sun. There's also color guard yucca, a cultivar of our native Yucca filamentosa that has that variegated yellow center stripe, and when it's cold outside, you'll get some reds. There's also the Apuntia cactus, Santa Rita, that when it's colder outside has that purple glow to it. I absolutely love our native cultivar The center stripe agave that has that variegated stripe down the center, and it produces pups. These little plants will pop up here and here and here, and so you have those to utilize or give away, and that though all those thrive in full to part sun. Our native grasses, they add variations in texture, form, and color. I absolutely love those, and we want to make sure we have time for questions, and so I'm going to go through these a little quickly so we can get to the other plants, but native grasses are great at adding texture, contrast, and movement. If you're looking for shrubs, Texas sage is a great one for full sun. Dwarf wax myrtle will work in full sun to part shade, even an area that gets a little as 2 to 3 hours of sunlight. If you're looking to attract hummingbirds, the flame acanthus is a great shrub for full to part sun. For those densest shade areas where you can't get shrubs to grow, American beautyberry thrives in dense shade to part shade, even can handle some sun. Dwarf palmettos. People are surprised that we have a native palm that gets 4 to 6 feet tall and wide, and it is extremely drought tolerant and will thrive in full sun to part shade, or full shade rather, full sun, full shade, and it's evergreen. So you get to look at that foliage year round. It adds a lot of textural contrast. Softleaf yucca is another great yucca that works well in full sun to part shade. Turk's cap. This is a plant where you can't get something to grow. You've tried any plant, you want to plug that gap. It is a great native perennial that thrives in full sun to full shade. I also like the salvias, like the mealy blue sage for sun, or the cedar sage for shade, or the autumn sage for sun. All of those are great long bloomers, as is the lyre-leaf sage, which thrives in the densest, shadier spots. Another great shade plant is the Texas gold columbine, which explodes with these incredible yellow blooms in the spring. Greg's mistflower, if you want to attract butterflies like these queen butterflies pictured, or the monarchs, this is the best plant. Works in full sun to part shade, and works like a ground cover. It likes to spread. One of my favorite plants is Texas rock rose, full sun to part shade, about 2.5 foot tall and wide. One of our native hibiscus. Gara, I was enjoying our Gara blooms this morning. Some people say it looks like dancing butterflies as it kind of whirls around on its stems, but a great perennial for full to part sun. Fall aster is a great subshrub that blooms in the fall and thrives in full sun to part shade conditions. Echinacea is another great perennial for full sun to part sun. Rudbeckia grows in the same conditions very well with Echinacea, a good combination. I mentioned Blackfoot daisy, but it's great for the sunniest, hottest, driest spots, and this is what it looks like right now. Despite heat and drought, they thrive and bloom. It makes a great combination with the right skullcap, which is a low-growing, maybe gets 6 to a foot and a half, 6 inches to a foot and a half tall, but those beautiful purple blooms and thrives in hot, sunny spots. If you're looking for a vine, you could grow cross vine or coral honeysuckle, both native vines that thrive in full sun to part shade. A native ground cover for hot, dry spots is that snake herb, which crawls along the ground with delicate purple flowers. If you want a ground cover where turf grass won't grow, frog fruit is a great one. I also love it as a turf alternative for parkways or hill strips. It'll thrive in full sun down to maybe 2 to 3 hours of sunlight, and is an incredibly easy to grow ground cover. And then I just wanted to throw this last one in there. People know hydrangeas are high water users. And high water using plants typically are going to struggle through the droughts in Texas. So I wouldn't recommend planting traditional Eastern American native hydrangeas. They like acid soils and lots of rainfall. Asian hydrangeas, the same thing. But there is a hydrangea that is native to the Louisiana border that touches Texas. That's the oak leaf hydrangea, and that is a drought tolerant plant. And really, you're just making better choices replacing plants in your landscape that are struggling, like the traditional hydrangea, with things that are more drought tolerant, more adapted to our soil, more adapted to the heat and the temperature swings we get in the winter. You can also choose to plant native seed mixes in pocket prairies or micro meadows. Group plants together by similar needs. So sun plants kind of go in the same spot. Plants that are really xeric need to be planted together for the most part. Plants with the same soil and nutrient needs should be planted together, making sure that your landscape thrives for season to come. Now, wrapping that all up and putting it together to keep your garden healthy in times of drought, again, it's watering deeply and infrequently using that cycle and soak method. It just is watering in different cycles instead of all at once. That allows the water to infiltrate. So it's deeper into the soil profile and the roots grow deeper, and deeper roots can tap into more soil moisture and they're more heat and drought tolerant. Or use drip irrigation. That is a great tip as well, especially in your landscape beds. Maintain that 2 to 4 inches of mulch. So maybe you want to add a little bit of mulch right now to get you through the summer and help hold on to that moisture. Check your irrigation system periodically and make sure you don't have any leaks and it's running at the right times in the right manner. I would also add, avoid fertilizing during the summer. A lot of people think, oh, my lawn is yellowing a little bit. I want to add some fertilizer to green it up. But generally, if you feed a plant and it produces new growth, that new growth is going to use more water to keep it alive. So fertilizing is great, but for me, it's better to use a slow release fertilizer in the spring and then again in the fall, and that gets us through the season. Raise your mower height in the summer. That helps to shade the turf a little bit. I raised mine and mowed this morning. And also it helps your root system grow a little bit deeper. Typically, like if you like golf fairways, short grasses have a short truncated root system. Taller grasses tend to have more of a root system underneath the ground. You can also look in what plants you have that struggle through this summer. As we progress through the next 3 months, hopefully we get some rain and cooler temperatures, but probably it's going to be a hot, dry one. Those plants that struggle, just replace those with the plants that thrive through the summer, or visit your local nursery, take some more of these classes, learn more about the native and adapted plants that thrive in our area. Again, great resources at waterisawesome.com. Now, I also wanted to make a note. A lot of people say, I just turned off my irrigation system and I never water. While that seems good in theory from a conservation standpoint, the challenge is especially if you have newly planted plant material of those that are still establishing, if you turn off your water completely and you never water, those plants could suffer. And when those plants suffer, there's a chance for weeds, plants you don't want to grow to get in, or you may have to be replacing plants in a landscape. So again, you can visit waterisawesome.com. You have a couple choices to choose for email alerts and text messages to tell you when to water. That's all scientific data. Nobody's trying to trick you or get you to water this way or that way. It's just based on weather station data, the evaporation and transpiration from plants. What moisture does that plant need in order to thrive without watering too much? And that will protect your investment through the heat of the summer. If you want to learn more, there's some great classes with Water is Awesome and Tarrant Regional Water District. There's also different organizations like the Master Naturalists, the Master Gardeners, the Native Prairies Association in Texas that have some great classes and literature to help you thrive. You also may want to choose to read more, like the book Texas Wildscapes, or get your landscape certified as a Monarch Way Station or a National Wildlife Federation certified wildlife habitat, or Texan by Nature's Laura Bush's foundation that also offers a landscape certification. You put these signs in your landscape and it lets your neighbors know the reason why you're choosing to plant the right native and adapted plants for our climate. Now, we'll open it up for questions, and if you didn't get a chance to, please type in your question for a chat, and we will get those answered. But again, visit Water is Awesome. There are some great resources there on the website. I especially love the great resources there for the Texas Yard Makeover, but there are also some handouts that are fantastic that you can download and learn more about gardening in Texas. And I think at that point, we'll pass it back over to Heather. And do you have any questions in the chat?
Yes, we do. So I don't think you can see them from your end. So I'm going to just have to feed them to you. But we do have several questions. Thank you so much for all of the wisdom you've shared with us. Let's see. All right. Leland asks, if mulch gets packed, should you break it up?
You may want to. And so traditionally, in our area, 2 to 4 inches of mulch, that organic matter, we'll call it, in the soil, it'll tend to break down and settle pretty rapidly. If you have adequate moisture, if it doesn't dry out completely and you're not compacting it, that should infiltrate water pretty good. There are some studies that show that in very arid areas where you have your mulch layer exceeds 4 inches, that sometimes that can inhibit water infiltrating. However, again, there are studies that show that if we do maintain 2 to 4 inches of mulch, we have up to 60% more water infiltrate the soil instead of running off. So if it is matted where you feel like water cannot infiltrate the soil, maybe you want to take a spade fork or a little shovel and kind of break it up a little bit. But what happens is in microbial active soil communities, you'll have fungi, bacteria, you'll also have pill bugs and different things that break up that organic matter. And then over time, it should stay loose and fluffy. But if it is hard on the top, you might want to loosen it up a little bit.
Okay, great. Let's see. All right, Monique is asking about what plants you recommend near your house foundation and how close to the foundation should you plant?
Yeah, this is a great one. And I actually thought about this morning. So Dr. Dottie Woodson, she has a greenhouse there in Fort Worth, and she was extension agent in Tarrant County and worked with us at Texas A&M in Dallas. And she developed a resource on foundation watering and foundation plantings that you can find visiting Texas A&M AgriLife. There's a bookstore has a database and stuff. And I thought I needed to repost that because it's great information. But a lot of people are really worried. And again, we talk to the public every day about plants, and the biggest fear is they're planting something that's going to tear up their foundation. Underneath a home's foundation is a low oxygen environment, right? You either have a pier and beam or you have a slab foundation, but there's not oxygen exchange happening like is happening in the soil layers around your home. It's also a low water environment, or at least it should be. It's designed to be, right? Because your roof wicks water away from your landscape, your soil wicks, or from the foundation, your soil wicks water away. So there's really no way for water to get underneath your home's foundation unless there's a leak. So unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. Hopefully, again, I worked in construction for a long time. It's not coming from the plumbers or the foundation guys, but your foundation is having issues because of our heavy clay soils. They're called smectite clay. They dry out, what we're seeing right now with the big cracks, and then when it rains, they swell up. That's one of the challenges of getting water to infiltrate our soil when we're watering. And so you can run a designated line around your home's foundation about 18 inches, 12 to 18 inches away. And so even if your plants in your bed don't need water, you may want to have a designated line to water your foundation. Now, in terms of a plant root zone, what I typically look at is the mature width of a plant. So if I'm planting a shrub and it says it can get 6 to 8 feet wide, then I would take half of that width, so about 4 feet, and I usually add another foot to that. So if I'm getting a shrub that is going to get 8 feet big, then I'll plant it about 5 feet away from my home's foundation. The only issue, and really from a construction standpoint, what I'm worried about is not the roots, but I'm worried about tree branches and damage to my soffit or my fascia, or my gutters, or stuff like that if trees grow big. But it shouldn't have any issue with your home's foundation unless your foundation has a leak. And then the problem has nothing to do with the plant. It has to do with that plumbing leak. There's no way that a plant's root can know that there is water inside of a pipe. It doesn't seek it out and break it up, or seek out a foundation and break it up. So large trees, if you were planting a bur oak that gets 50 feet wide, then I would plant it, probably 60 feet at least away from the home. But I will also tell you that if you look at the pictures of a root zone of those plants, most of the time their roots exceed 3 times the drip line. So your neighbor's tree has roots that are coming into your landscape. So your roots are probably not that big. But it's great question when we get on.
Yeah, definitely. I think everybody in North Texas probably has foundation issues, or at least has doors that won't open or close sometimes of the year. And I know I do.
And don't feel like it's just you. If you're like, oh, I hate my home, it's
everybody.
Pretty much new houses. We would have to go and fix the little fissures if we have a really dry time or wet time. And we're really, as we're watering, we're just trying to mitigate that. We don't want to overwater. We don't want to underwater. We just want to find the balance.
Okay, let's see. See some more questions coming in here. All right. Someone is asking about getting your St. Augustine stable and removing weeds.
Yeah, so St. Augustine uses a little bit more water than some of our other warm season turf grasses, like the Bermuda grass and the buffalo grass, that are more drought tolerant. But if we can water deeply and infrequently using cyclone soak irrigation, I would also probably recommend top dressing with a little bit of sifted compost, or you could do a 50-50 mix of sifted compost, a fine compost. You can buy it already sifted, and then also a little bit of that sand. Then that tends to, especially if you have a clay soil, it just tends to help infiltrate more water if you have a compacted clay, and then hold on to that moisture for longer. So if you're sticking with the St. Augustine, you can also look at core aeration that kind of helps and break up those heavy clays. Well, I think there's the second part of that question. I lost it. I'm sorry.
They asked also about just weeds in general. I think they said that they had a specific weed.
So
but, I mean,
people hate to hear this, but cultural practices like keeping your lawn healthy, slow release fertilizer in the spring and the fall, making sure we're not overwatering. St. Augustine is notorious for fungal problems, but it would actually be hand pulling the weeds. You can do pre-emergent fertilizers in the spring to control spring and summer weeds, or in the fall to control winter weeds. But physical removal of the weed. Get yourself a highest rated weed popper. Go to your local nursery, ask them. Amazon has reviews on them. And I tell my wife, I'm like, we're having a birthday party this weekend for my daughter, and I just, I'm a horticulturalist, so people are coming over to my house, and it's like, I gotta look pretty. And so it's especially the perennial weeds, it's physically removing those is the best thing. You can also mow more frequently to prevent the weeds from going to seed in the first place. And then as a last resort, you could do a selective herbicide. There's some that work on just broadleaf weeds, and then some that work on grassy weeds, and others that work on the sedges or grass-like weeds. And if it's a real bad infestation. But again, if you're using any of that stuff, whether it's organic or synthetic, always read the label and apply per label instructions. That's going to protect you, that's going to protect your landscape, and it's going to protect, our water resources as those wash off our landscape.
Absolutely, that's very important. And that's a good segue into our next question, which is it okay to aerate your lawn in the summertime, or should you wait for another time of year?
Yeah, I like to core aerate in the spring. So you don't want to do it too early in the spring. If we get a late freeze, that could open up to more freeze damage. So I wait till everything's kind of greened up, like the third mowing or so. You can core aerate. I like to core aerate, and there's companies you can pay to do it, or you can rent the equipment. I think Sunbelter is one that has those. And then I'll top dress with compost. If I'm core aerating because I have compacted heavy clays, it's a good idea to top dress with compost after that. It also, not only does it add organic matter to the soil, but it kind of helps inoculate with microbial community, that it's going to break down some of that stuff a little quicker. Going into the summer, you don't want to do anything that is going to stress your lawn. So once we start getting temperatures 90 above, I would probably not core aerate. I also, again, wouldn't core aerate down, into November, when we do have a chance of a freeze again. September, October is fine, but you don't want to open up the root zone to cold temperatures that could cause damage as things are kind of going dormant. So spring is a good time to do it. Fall is a good time to do it. Avoid freezing or extreme hot temperatures.
Okay. All right. So we've got a few different questions just asking about whether this presentation will be available. And so I will say it is being recorded, and anyone who registered today will get a link from the for the recording sent to your email address whenever we post it on YouTube. So look for that coming in the next few weeks or so you can watch again if you would like. Last question. Do you have any recommendations for a more areas that maybe get quite a bit of shade sometimes and sometimes of the year, like in the summertime, but then when the sun shifts in the winter, it's full sun?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges in a landscape area. And so again, because the sun's position changes, so spring and fall, it's kind of in the midpoint. Winter, it's kind of more south in the sky, and then you have in the summer it's more overhead. So could have spots in your landscape that 3/4 of the year they get shade, and then during the hottest part of the year they get sun. That's certainly a challenge. The easiest way to handle that, I would put something like a red bud there, and then those shade plants, they're protected a little bit. So you have a smaller ornamental tree that can thrive in full sun to full shade, and that makes that area a shade area now. Alternatively, things like Turk's cap, the lyre-leaf sage is a very aggressive plant, but that's one. Cedar sage, it could be the wax myrtles, it could be American beautyberry. If you're looking for plants that thrive in full sun to full shade, then no matter what you have, those plants are going to be successful. So inland sea oats is another great plant that I love for that spot. I'm just trying to think of others. But there are several. And it was interesting to hear that Water is Awesome is developing a native plant database, but there's also Texas Smartscape, and you can visit that website if you just type in Texas Smartscape, and that's a great one. Or the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, or most of your Master Gardener groups or Native Plant Society groups, and they have plant lists, and just go down there and look for, hey, this thrives in full sun and full shade, so I'll do that. And then again, you could do something like the ornamental tree that will create a shaded spot during the summer.
Okay, great. Yes, I agree. Turk's cap, I think you can't go wrong with Turk's cap. There are several plants like that that are just happy to be in the sun, happy to be in the shade, happy to be wet, happy to be dry.
Yeah,
Those are
those are the
the best
best plants. And honestly, because they thrive, they're the cheapest plants, because you can dig it up and be like, hey, I love Turk's cap, work great in this spot. I'm going to put it in this spot. I'm going to put it in this spot.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And then let's see. We've got a bunch of thank yous coming in. So thank you very much, Daniel. Everybody has loved your presentation. Everybody is saying that they learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. And like I said, we'll be sending out an email in a few weeks or so with the recording so that you can watch again if you would like to, or if you maybe came in late and missed a little bit. And check out Rooted In, where Daniel is coming from. And also be sure to check out waterisawesome.com and look for that new Texas Yard Makeover campaign coming out soon. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Thank y'all.
Bye.